Welcome to DC to Be Revolution. I'm your host, Noah Volz. This is where I'm helping chiropractic students think big in order to live large. Today, I'm here with an excellent innovator and a guy who's really drilled down and really helped to make his name in chiropractic. Dr. Jordan Shallow. He is the owner of the Muscle Doc. He's host of RX Radio, and he's doing so much more. So I'll let him tell you all about that. Thanks, Doc, for being here today.
Oh yeah, no man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's start with your origin story, so to speak. You know, how did you get into chiropractic? What were you hoping to do once you got out of school? And how have you been able to do that so far?
Sure. So started off, played sports growing up, like most kids, track and field. I'm from Canada, so hockey and lacrosse, swam. And with those sports came injuries. And I remember in the 12th grade, my gym teacher was like, you got to go see this chiropractor. I had a knee issue at the time. And I was like, what, a chiropractor? There's nothing wrong with my back or neck, and I don't have headaches or anything like that. He's like, no, trust me, you idiot. Just go see him. And within 2 weeks, I was back on the ice. I'm like, yeah, okay. And simultaneously, I was a personal trainer. So getting into the first year of undergraduate studies, I sort of fell in love with lifting weights. And from there, sort of began a career as a personal trainer to pay my way through school. Sort of as continued a relationship with my chiropractor at the time, and then realizing like, this guy works fairly similar to how I work, one-on-one interaction, which I really like. People are excited to see him, but he drives a Range Rover. I was like, oh, I like Range Rovers. That's interesting. So then I started looking into it. I was actually started as a history and political science major at the University of Windsor in Canada in Southwestern Ontario, and made the jump over to exercise science and public health. And then from there, went on to Palmer West. That would have been 2012, and graduated 2015, and opened up my doors soon after that. So that's sort of that in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, great. And so, you've only been out 2 years. That's why I'm really excited to talk to you. I'm about to graduate in a year and a half, and I'm curious about, what's next. I've noticed that you've kind of branded your practice, or kind of marketing your practice, as integrative performance therapy. So,
Sure.
What is integrative performance therapy, and why did you choose to kind of use that as your tagline?
Honestly, it was to avoid stigma associated with chiropractors. The best compliment I got going through school, and the one thing I really try and hammer home to kids in school now when they reach out to me, because I'm not far removed, I have a lot of friends who are still going through the Palmer program, is like, practice how you want to practice. And I sort of knew going in that I wanted to emulate or replicate the chiropractors that I've seen that had worked for me. But I think a lot of people can buy in, if they're not certain of how they want to practice, can buy into, let's call it dogma, for lack of a better term, within the chiropractic profession, because it is such an umbrella term. And to each their own, but just for me, knowing, being an athlete, continuing to excel in competitive sports and wanting to work with like-minded people, knowing what's going to work for them, and then practicing that and not being influenced by, in a sense, it sounds pretty close-minded, and a lot of times it was, but having skepticism to the borderline of cynicism with what you're being sold. Because what I think a lot of kids, and I don't even like the word alternative healthcare, because I really think when done appropriately, it is true healthcare, and not, it's a bit of a corny statement, but sick care, like common Western medicine is. But I think that we've been told that we bought into a line on a spectrum further afield than what normal is. And I think in that opened up a whole nother market left of our normal for potential education and seminars and supplements, and just perpetuating bullshit that these kids with, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and undergraduate debt. And I mean, you live in the Bay Area, you know what it's like to try and pay the rent around here. So I think a big thing with me was avoiding that riffraff, avoiding that business of chiropractic education, and going out and pursuing and talking to people, talking to soon to be potential patients, and realize what their perception of me was going to be as a title of chiropractor. So honestly, my tagline, integrated performance therapy, is it goes after my niche market, and it sort of masks my biggest weakness is actually being a chiropractor, because a lot of people do think that bone first model, which is not how I operate at all. And that was my sort of preconceived notion of chiropractors when I was first told, no, you got to go to a chiropractor. It's like, dude, it's not my back, it's not my neck. So that was my thought process behind sort of the wording of it. And you have to look sort of really closely in the fine print to realize that I am actually a chiropractor. Some people think I'm a physical therapist or a massage therapist or whatever. That's fine. As long as I get the results I look for, you can call me a pizza man. It doesn't really bother me.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that about you. I feel like so many chiropractors really like want everybody to know it's all about chiropractic. They're all about chiropractic. But what you've done, and what I really like about what you've done, is you make it really patient centric. You know, you format everything in, this is what I do, this is how I can help you. This is, you know, you have so many educational materials that are just like, this is how I can support you. And none of that mentions chiropractic. It's all performance. It's all functional movement. It's all kinetic change. So yeah, thank you for kind of breaking down, you know, your origin story and what you've done so far. I know that there's a lot of students that really want to kind of focus on this unique target and unique market, and really like you're saying, really offer this exceptional care. You know, what was you knew exactly what kind of practice you wanted to create. What were the tools of that practice, and how did you implement them into what you're doing now?
Sure. I think a lot of things, getting into niche markets, it was something I was warned against, actually. A lot of instructors at school don't go after it. Athletes don't have money. I heeded a lot of warnings from a lot of, you know, quote unquote, like professionals in the industry. And it's kind of a labor of love. Like, you have to be about the niche you're getting into. You can't really fake it. They can sniff you out pretty good. So being a competitive powerlifter myself, it definitely helped the transition be fairly smooth. So I think they look for a certain level of empathy. There's definitely a market to be had if you can be a part of that community. And I think that's something that I see, and I sort of saw going through school, that people saw the potential opportunity as like a market for patients, instead of like a community that they actually wanted to be a part of, because they were all sort of chasing the same passion. So I have a colleague of mine, Dr. Jordan Junta. He's in San Jose, out of a CrossFit gym. And I think a lot of people tried to follow his model as well, where they sort of saw the community aspect of CrossFit as a potential market, instead of actually sort of falling in love with the sport itself. And I mean, he excels at it to an amazing level. Like, he competes California regionals. So the trust is transferable, and the people see me in the gym and I'm a powerlifter, and they trust my advice as a lifter because of what I've taken to pursue the lifting to the level that I have. And a similar thing with his CrossFit, where they trust him because he is, and a lot of times this is not the case of someone who is really good at a sport. Those who can do can't teach. But with the doctor title literally meaning teacher, they don't know what we do as chiropractors. I mean, we could be, you know, crystal healer, stone healing or whatever, but they trust that it works for us, and that they want to see their progress get to the point that we're at, in the same community, in the same niche. So that transferability of trust was big for me. That just going into the gym and not looking for patients. Patients sort of found me, for the lack of a better term, because they saw that I was into the same thing that they were into. And it doesn't have to be lifting weights. Like, if your market is people that play chess, then go play chess. You know what I mean? But you have to be about it, because they can sniff you out pretty good. And if they think that you're coming at them with a sales pitch, guards up and you've lost them. So I think for me, just immersing myself in the culture that now is my main market was the biggest thing. But it's more of a retrospective analysis of how I've got to where I am, and not a premeditated sort of strategy. It just sort of fell into place because I like to do what I'd like to do.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, because I know, you know, just from talking to other students, so many students are saying, oh, I want to get into sports, or I want to, you know, treat soccer moms, or whatever it is. But they're, you know, they've they've never been an athlete, or they've never actually been a soccer mom, or they're not part of that community. They've never been part of that community. And then at, their mid-20s, they're trying to all of a sudden be part of this community that they know nothing about. So like you're saying, like, retrospectively, like looking back, what communities have you been a part of? What communities do you understand already? What communities do you enjoy being a part of? And then finding out how does chiropractic apply to that community you're already integrated into?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, with our scope of practice, we're definitely like a catch-all. Like the soccer mom can benefit from a certain style or subset or discipline within the profession that might, alter very differently than maybe what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I think just being that Rosetta Stone of the profession to the market or to the community that you're a part of is probably the best asset you can sort of ingrain in yourself in that like latter portion of school. So that would be like my best advice is, if you go looking for a market, you'll never find it.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. And then, once you find that market, I feel like you've done a really good job of, once you found it, really creating value and providing a lot of content and value to that market. Can you talk about some of the things that you do in order to create that value, in order to make yourself, like you said, trustworthy within that market? Sure.
I think having a passion for what you do, like, and not even what you do as a professional, but the point of relation to the market that you're into, like it almost becoming like don't even think of it as getting better. At least for me, it's all about performance, right? It's these people don't care if their back hurts. Like dealing with guys that, squat world record weights, or, they put up some of the biggest numbers in the world, that they don't care about pain. They care about how can I get 10 extra pounds on my total. So I need to sort of take what I learned from school, input that with sort of the meathead brain, and then try and dissect or sort of disseminate information that'll help them like objectifiably on a platform. I mean, understanding who your audience is, I think is really big, because you don't want to dumb it down to the point where they think that, it's just bro science or intelligence. I'm speaking purely to the community that I talk with. So you want to still keep, a baseline sort of integrity of, using nomenclature, using the parlance of our profession, but sort of just dusting that in with sort of concepts that they're familiar with, and just taking them that next step. And then it's something that might be exclusive to more of the fitness industry side of things. But I guess what to extrapolate out from is like understanding where your market is as far as advertising to them. The fitness community, the gym goers, the powerlifters, bodybuilders, a lot of the exposure exists online through social media. So I could put up a billboard on the side of the 101, but every bodybuilder and powerlifter that's going to be driving down that road at 5 o'clock in rush hour traffic is going to have his phone in his lap, and he's going to be on Instagram. So yeah, I could get 10,000 cars that drive by it a day, but if I have 12,000 followers on a social media platform that they're going to actually tune into, then that to me, like, again, this is all retrospective analysis of something I just sort of stumbled upon, but looking back on it, like understanding what medium of advertising to go through first is probably the most beneficial, because it's all different. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, like you're going to attract different audience members. Like in starting off at the end of school, you don't have money, but you have time. Invest your time. Don't bother paying Yelp for their like bullshit sponsored ads, because that's a red flag. Someone sees that little yellow sponsor thing and they go right past it. Or if they click it, Yelp ads get Yelp patience. So you're going to have someone who's willing to voice their displeasure if it goes that way, and then perhaps slander you on Yelp. And so I think, to me, investing time and disseminating good content relative to the market you're at on the platform that'll be have the highest return on investment. Like veer away from putting information on Instagram. It's instantaneous. It's very quick turnover. Put that on YouTube, put that on Facebook. That's where people get their news. So dissecting how and where people get what sort of information has sort of been something I've learned over time to really maximize the amount of return on that investment of time.
Yeah, I think that's really important, for students who are coming out of school, is that, we think we have to cover all of those different social media platforms, but really each platform is very specific to the type of reputation that you're trying to build and how you're trying to build that reputation. And
exactly.
You've done a great job of recognizing that. I imagine initially, it was all passion based, creating all this content. But now, are you in kind of like a content creation schedule, or how do you figure out what's going to be valuable for your audience and how to produce that?
Honestly, what helps me the most is seeing more patients, because it's common things present commonly. And I mean, dealing more so in like high level athletes, sports performance, their training looks similar, right? Like if you're dealing with powerlifters, they all squat, bench, and deadlift. So pattern recognition over time and how to like maybe get ahead of some of the issues you're seeing. It's going to save me time to do other things outside the office that could be of more monetary value than being in the office if I don't have to see these people all the time. So a lot of my resources are just inspired by patients in the office. So if I see, it was to the point where I would just keep like a sort of a quick checklist on paper of like what I saw each week, and whether it's a particular exercise done incorrectly or, certain, like loading parameters, some sort of interval with training that they're tweaking with that seems to be problematic, then just, getting rid of my geographic bottleneck of who I can see within, a 20-mile radius in Mountain View, and then putting that out there. That is sort of how I got to this point. Now it's a little bit more self-sustaining. It's an easy process now. Like, the whiteboard is right there. If I'm thinking the gym I train out of is right outside my office door. So I can be mid-workout and be like, oh yeah. A lot of things that I think to be second nature, but as I explain to someone on the gym floor, they're like, oh wow, really? I didn't know that did that. And it's like, you didn't? Maybe, 12,000 other people didn't know that either. So into the board, throw the camera up on the table, quick hit record, and it's on YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram within 5 or 10 minutes. So it's a lot less maybe cerebral now than it was before. Before, a 60-second video would take me 2 hours to get right and sort of be okay with talking in front of the camera, and still something I'm not great at now, but to the point where you just get used to it. It's just sort of autopiloted, and it's sort of self-sustaining at this point.
Yeah, and based on the patients that you're seeing and just those day-to-day interactions, and now a few years out, you have more confidence in what you're doing. I wanted to drill down just a little bit to something you said about pattern recognition, because this is something I hear a lot in the kind of performance world, and especially with chiropractors working on supporting performance. What do you feel like are the tools in your tool belt that you've developed that really help you with pattern recognition and with, improving performance through that?
Sure. I think you got to have your own personal preoccupation with improving your own performance. Like, no one wants a fat personal trainer. And in my field, no one would want like a chiropractor or a physical therapist or some sort of manual therapist that didn't pursue with some sort of passion what they're after. So pattern recognition comes down to like almost empathy and being in tune with that sixth sense of sort of proprioception and kinematic awareness. Because if you move in a variation of different ways and a variation of different loads, then you can internalize what someone is doing, right? Like, I pull, and this is going to be very specific to my demographic, but I pull conventional deadlift. So I deadlift with my hands outside my feet. It doesn't create a good mechanical advantage for me because the range of motion is longer. But I started dealing with a lot of athletes that would pull sumo, more mechanical advantage, a little more stress to the hips, less to the lower back, hands inside the plane of the knees. So in order to really understand some of the pathology I was seeing, I did a training block sumo. I switched to what they were doing, and I was like, oh, okay, I understand now. It's this. It's your adductors. It's lateral hip stability issues. You're not generating torque. Blah 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 blah. But I think really putting yourself in their shoes really helps pattern recognition, because I can recognize patterns internally a lot easier than I can, or there was a point where that was the case. Now, once you see it enough times, you can sort of you can sort of dissect it on someone else a lot easier. But in its inception, a lot of it started with me taking on the stressors that they would put on themselves if it's something I hadn't already experienced, like an injury I hadn't already had. Like bench press was a common one. People flare their elbows out too much, just for example. And I know that firsthand because I've torn both pecs bench pressing that way. So I think just being in tune with not only corrective exercise, and that's a big part of sports performance, but I think a lot of people miss the boat on just exercising correctly. I think they get too overzealous with cute rehab shit, pardon my French, but that's honestly what I see a lot of, especially perpetuated on Instagram and social media, kind of in my wheelhouse. A lot of guys swing too far to the research fence, which is more geared towards geriatrics. Frankly, the athletes I work with, you're not going to find subjects that will mimic their caliber, their ability. So, I mean, I deal with guys who want to go from squatting 800 pounds to 850 pounds, or deadlift 700 pounds to 800 pounds. So it's a little different than, getting someone post-op rehab, this muscle activates this, cite this study. It's like, you sort of that's where the art form comes in. I think that's where the personal and the science really ties in, because I don't want to say a lot of what I do isn't founded in research, because I think a lot of what I do is based on a fundamental understanding of biomechanics. Mix that with sort of my understanding of the demands of the sport, then pair that with the needs and the sort of the demand of the athlete itself. And that, to me, is evidence-based in my field, in my niche. So that's how I sort of go about analyzing performance and pattern recognition. Is it kind of starts with me, and then it just seeing enough people over time, and then sort of extrapolating out what you think will work, and then not have an ego as far as ditching what doesn't, and then reintroducing things or introducing things that might help, sort of knowing what the foundation of the movements are, but also like the foundation of that perception of the movement when you go through it.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. It's almost like your practice is evidence informed. The science is back there. It's informing the decisions that you're making. But ultimately, based on your own personal experience, based on the evidence you're getting from the clients that you're working with, and how the improvements that they're able to make, you're able to really create this whole picture where you are offering what we all hope to offer, which is a very personalized approach to that specific person, and something that really is going to work for them, because that's what everybody wants at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, you could cite research till the cows come home, but if you don't get some of these guys' results, they'll keep bouncing around until they find it. So a lot of times you have to kind of think on your feet a little bit, because it's stimulus really is what we're trying to get after. Whether that stimulus is, coming from an effect on the nervous system through adjusting or soft tissue work, you need to match the stimulus to their threshold. And I deal with a lot of high threshold athletes. So a lot of times I need to extrapolate out from research to maybe lengths that otherwise wouldn't be pursued in an empirical setting, just because its application is so little. It's these very few athletes in the world who can do what these people do. So knowing in my own mind the progression out from there, but yeah, like you said, maybe more evidence informed or evidence based, but not dealing directly back to a single site or a citation, but rather taking maybe a more benign intervention and then ramping it up to the higher threshold athletes that I deal with.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. So I know that, students, young doctors are going to want to develop the skill set that you've been really great at developing. So much of what you've talked about today is definitely unique to my ears. Very few people I've talked to, and I've done over 50 interviews, are talking about kind of this way of internalizing chiropractic and understanding how it works on your own body, and then being able to kind of extrapolate to other people and see those patterns. So where are the opportunities for people to get in touch with you? How can people learn more about what you're doing and kind of pursue a similar career trajectory?
Sure. Well, I mean, if anyone watching wants to contact me, it's jordan@themuscledoc.com. I'm in Mountain View, California. So anyone local to the Bay Area, feel free to reach out and swing by, and I can show you the whole operation. But I mean, social media, I'm bad at this now. The_muscle_doc is Instagram. I think it's the same for YouTube and Facebook. But for anyone looking to sort of pursue this realm, is you just got to dive in feet first. I think, like, if you're looking, and I think that true of any discipline, whether you're trying to, or any niche rather, whether you're trying to get into the powerlifting, CrossFit, Olympic lifting, weightlifting community, just, you got to dive into it, but dive into it with a passion, not dive into it with sort of worry about outcome over income, I guess would be my best advice. And, the money will sort itself out in time. But if you worry about the outcome first and something that you want to pursue with passion, then I think you'll be better off at the end than setting up a rack and crack shop with an insurance and a CA at the front desk and all that. I mean, you might make a ton of money, but it's not really it's not going to be fulfilling in the long run. And plus for me, it's like my commute to the gym is outside that door. So that's what I love to do. So I think whether it's weightlifting or whatever, soccer moms, whatever you want to do, just go do it now. Like, especially if a lot of your listeners are still in school. Like, I started the social media sort of campaign probably in my last year of school, and I started earlier than most, and I didn't start early enough. I'm building a base, building a following, and building a brand. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on brand building alone. It's something that I still work on, is like, if you start yesterday when it comes to stuff like that. It's never too early to have a social media presence, and you don't need that DC next to the name to do it. I mean, be careful on the legal side of how you word what you're doing as far as advice goes, but by and large, a lot of times you can just, enter an email address, enter a password, and, Robert's your father's brother. There you go. Bob's your uncle. You have an Instagram page and access to a community far outside your geographical reach. So I would get started immediately if that's something you're looking to pursue.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And it's so important for us to remember that, like, once that degree is conferred is not the starting point. The starting point is actually the first day that you start school, because that's really that's when you've made the decision and you're moving in that direction. And so the more that you can do up front while you're in school, while you're, receiving all that information, and that better off you'll be once you do finally get that degree. So I think that's really important. So this has been a production of DC2B Revolution, helping chiropractic students think big to live large. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave some comments in the comments below so we can talk more about, outcome over income and all of the amazing things that Dr. Jordan has shared today. Doc, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.